Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you so much for being with us here in the OPM Media Center. Just a few ground rules ahead of our beginning. We ask, especially for the photographers, that you turn the flash element off. Also, for those with their cell phones or smart watches, we ask that you put it on silent or on the off position at this time. We will be having a brief media briefing, and so we would want not to have any disturbance during that period at all. May we also encourage those with walkie-talkies to turn them down as best as possible as well. So again, any listening device or any device that would interrupt the proceedings here, we ask that you turn them on the silent position or off, and for the photographers, we ask that you take your flash element off so that if you're taking photos during the briefing, that it does not disturb the broadcast. Ahead of the Prime Minister and the Secretary General arriving, I will introduce all the officials who are at the bilateral, so that once the Prime Minister and the Secretary General enter the stage, they will begin speaking. So the acknowledgements will happen ahead of both principals taking the stage. It's 1 p.m. in Kingston, Jamaica. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and visiting guests. It's Monday, May 15, 2023, and welcome to the Media Center here at the Office of the Prime Minister in Kingston, Jamaica. Today, Prime Minister, the Most Honorable Andrew Holness, is pleased to welcome to Jamaica the Secretary General of the United Nations, His Excellency Antonio Guterres, and the delegation from the UN. A warm Jamaican welcome to everyone, including the local media and those joining online as well. With us in the Media Center today are the Honorable Senator the Honorable Kamina Johnson-Smith, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, the Honorable Dr. Nigel Clark, Minister of Finance and the Public Service, the Honorable Desmond McKenzie, the Minister of Local Government and Rural Development, Senator the Honorable Matthew Samuda, the Minister without Portfolio in the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation, the Honorable Audrey Sewell, the Permanent Secretary at the Office of the Prime Minister, Ambassador Sheila Sealy-Monteith, the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, Ambassador Brian Wallace, the Permanent Representative of Jamaica to the United Nations, Ambassador Angela Comfort, the Under-Secretary for Multilateral Affairs at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, Ambassador Rocky Mead, the Strategic Advisor in the Office of the Prime Minister, Mr. E. Courtney Rattray, the Chef de Cabinet at the UN, Ms. Michelle Giles McDonough, the Director of Sustainable Development Unit at the EOSG, Mr. Vincent Sweeney, the UN Resident Coordinator in Jamaica, and Mr. Alejandro Filion, the Deputy Director of Political Unit at the ESOG. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us here. Today, the Prime Minister had a bilateral discussion with the Secretary General of the United Nations covering several matters, including the situation in Haiti and the climate crisis facing the region and the world. Ladies and gentlemen, Prime Minister, the Most Honorable Andrew Holness, and Secretary General of the United Nations, His Excellency Antonio Guterres.
Thank you, Naomi. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Secretary General, Honorable Ministers, Secretary General, it is such a great pleasure to have you in Jamaica. This is, I gather, your first trip, but I'm certain it will not be your last trip. Once again, I extend heartiest welcome to Jamaica. Secretary General, you appointed me as co-convener of the Financing for Development in the era of COVID-19 and beyond, and then as co-chair along with our good friend, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau of Canada, as co-chair of the group of friends for SDG financing. We had very fruitful discussions on the work that we have undertaken in these two fora, on the critical challenges that developing countries are facing, and the need for reform of the international financial system. Excellency, we wish to assure you of Jamaica's strong commitment to this work, this very important work, and of Jamaica's commitment to multilateralism and the central role the United Nations plays in ensuring that these very important matters of the reform of the global financial architecture, that it is undertaken, that it is successful, and that it is beneficial for developing countries, and in particular, small island developing states like Jamaica. Secretary General, you acknowledge the courageous economic choices that Jamaica has made to achieve fiscal sustainability and to get our economy back on track for real growth since the pandemic. And I want to thank you, Secretary General, for recognizing this and the role that the Jamaican people played in this great sacrifice. You also articulated the need for urgent reform and the overall of the international economic and financial architecture to support reforms and to address unique risks and challenges faced by small island developing states like Jamaica. And in this regard, I thank you for your steadfast support for development of the multidimensional vulnerability index to more accurately assess the true state of small island developing states and increase their eligibility to receive greater financing to address their unique vulnerabilities. We agreed on the importance of a comprehensive approach to addressing their vulnerability to climate change, natural disasters, and external economic shocks. Secretary General, we also discussed the inability of the current financial architecture to address a number of global challenges, such as climate change, as well as the principles that would underpin a reformed system. Since 2016, along with the Prime Minister of Canada, I have consistently pushed for this reform. I'm pleased to see new initiatives built on the foundation that we have laid in terms of our work in this area. We noted the international financial institutions have been responsive to calls for reform in this respect, which gives hope for progress to address funding gaps and to provide emergency liquidity to developing countries for resilience building. But, Secretary General, as we agreed, there is still much more work that needs to be done. We also agreed, as we discussed the various points, the need for greater emphasis on adaptation in the discussion on climate change. More financing needs to be made available to developing countries, particularly small island states, for adaptation. Excellency, we also spent some time on regional matters, and in particular, the situation in Haiti. We lamented that there has not been more action to address the situation in Haiti. And as we do have this platform, Excellency, we repeat our call for greater attention to be paid by the international community to the very urgent security and humanitarian situation in Haiti. CARICOM is doing its part within its resources to assist. We led a mission to Haiti, which I led, and we had very meaningful discussions with the stakeholders there, and that process is advancing. I take the view, Excellency, that with greater effort, we can see a breakthrough towards a better and broader consensus towards a solution in Haiti. The inescapable fact, however, is that Haiti needs security support. So with those comments, Excellency, I turn over to you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, and first of all, thank you so very much for the wonderful hospitality that I have enjoyed during these 2 days. And an hospitality that allowed me to confirm what I knew. Jamaica is a wonderful country, an amazing country, a country that was able to invade peacefully the whole world with its culture, its music, and its art. And a country that is in itself the proof that diversity is a richness, not a threat, provided you adopt the right social cohesion policies. Honorable Prime Minister, honorable ministers, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. We are today facing, when we look at the present international financial architecture, a moral problem, a power problem, and a practical problem. First of all, a moral problem. We all remember that vaccines were not evenly distributed. We all remember that Europe, the United States, and other rich countries were able to print trillions to support their economies after COVID, the recovery of their economies, to support their populations. I don't think Jamaica had the possibility to print money, and most developing countries had not that possibility. And because not always adequate care was taken, this has given a partial contribution to the increase of inflation and interest rates that all developing countries are also now paying. Then, because there was a huge global liquidity problem, the IMF was able to issue special drawing rights. Special drawing rights is money created out of nothing. The countries of the European Union, to which my country belongs, 500 million people, a little bit less, received 260 billion US dollars. The African continent, 3 times the population, received 34 billion. There is something fundamentally wrong in the rules, because these are the rules of the system that allow for this injustice to take place. And then middle-income countries, and particularly relevant for small island developing states, do not face adequate debt relief mechanisms and do not face the possibility to have access to concessional funding at the levels that would be necessary, because they are considered to be middle-income countries, which again is a deep injustice, because small island development states in particular have a high level of vulnerability because of the structure of their economies, because of their geographic location, their size, and because of their enormous impact they suffer in relation to climate change. So there is a serious moral problem with the international financial system. And there is a power problem. The Bretton Woods institutions were created after the Second World War. Jamaica was not independent at that time. Most African countries were not independent at that time. And obviously, the structure of what was created, with small adaptations during the last decades, reflect the power relations that existed after the Second World War. They are outdated. And so the system is unfair and dysfunctional. And so the system needs reform to adapt it to the realities of today's global economy. And you know, power questions are always difficult to solve. And then we have a number of practical issues. Even with the present system, much more could have been done, and much more can be done in relation to a better link between climate and finance, and a stronger support to adaptation in particular, and in particular in small island development states. A lot more can be done in multiplying the effect of the work of the multilateral development banks if they change their business model, a new approach to risk, and they are able to use their resources to leverage massive access to private finance at reasonable costs for developing countries. Much more can be done in new instruments that allow, for instance, swaps between debt and investment in adaptation for climate change. So there are lots of things that can be done if there is political will to do so, even if we will not be able to solve, and I hope we will be sooner or later, the moral problem and the power problem. And I want to express our deep solidarity with Jamaica, with the SIDS, in relation to this moral, power, and practical problems. And we are determined to do our best to correct it. And this is the reason of my visit. We have presented our Sustainable Development Goals report, and we will have the SDG Summit in September, together with the Summit on Financing for Development. We are preparing a policy brief to all member states that will be issued in June on the reform of international financial architecture. We will have, at the same time, I will be addressing the G7 this week and the G20 when the G20 meets, and insist for the need for these moral, power, and practical problems to be solved. And it was very important for me, as we are doing this work, as we are preparing this work, to come here and to take profit of the leadership and the experience of Prime Minister Holness. Prime Minister Holness has been, as he described, a champion in relation to climate action and a champion in relation to an effective, reformed, multilateral financial architecture in the world. And it was very important because of the success of the policies that Prime Minister Holness and his government have developed that allowed the country to reduce substantially its dependency in relation to debt. It was very important to listen to him and to have his advice, to have his suggestions, to have his perspective, for me to be able to translate the dramatic needs and interests of developing countries, in particular of small island development states, in the next initiatives that we are developing in relation to climate, in relation to climate finance, and in relation to the global financial architecture. On the other hand, we, as Your Excellency mentioned, we have discussed, in particular, the situation in Haiti. Haiti is in a tragic situation. You have dramatic humanitarian needs, you have a political system that is paralyzed, and you have levels of violence by gangs that are absolutely appalling. The number of people killed, the number of people unable to live their lives, the dramatic food insecurity problems are indeed something that needs a much stronger commitment by the international community. We have a political problem, the need to bring the different stakeholders together to find a political way for a government, a legitimate government, to be recognized by all at the moment in which that political process is successful. And we need to address the violence of the gangs. I made a proposal to the Security Council a few months ago that I consider that it would be necessary in the context of the support of equipment and of training of the national police force to be able to have the presence of an international robust police force to crack down on the gangs, and in parallel with the political process to create the conditions for Haiti to be able to address its dramatic situation. This has been a difficult exercise. It has been difficult to mobilize the will of those that would have the best capacity to lead this operation, and it has been difficult to create also the political conditions to make it easier for different countries to accept to be part of this action. And here, once again, I want to pay tribute to Jamaica. First of all, Jamaica was the first country that immediately expressed its readiness to be part of this operation. And second, Jamaica, in the context of CARICOM, is involved in a very important political process trying to bring together the different stakeholders to find a way out of this political crisis. And I know of the visit that was paid to Haiti, and I know that a new meeting is scheduled, and that 3 eminent personalities were put in charge of leading this process of dialogue. I want to express my full support to the initiatives of Jamaica and CARICOM, And I want to, once again, ask the international community to understand that an effective solidarity with Haiti is not only a matter of generosity, is essentially a matter of enlightened self-interest, because the present situation of Haiti reflects a threat to the security of the whole region and further afield. Once again, Your Excellency, Honorable Prime Minister, thank you so very much for your wonderful hospitality, and Jamaica can count on us to be strong advocates for the international community to recognize the success of your efforts and to support your country even much more effectively than what was done in the past.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Secretary General. You will understand if we can only permit a half a question. 2 questions.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. I'll consider mine as one, and then my next colleague can do another. Andrea Chisholm from Television Jamaica. Mr. Guterres, peace forms part of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Illegal guns are a threat to peace and stability. What will the United Nations be doing to amplify Jamaica's call and the call from other Caribbean leaders to tell the United States to help to do more to stem the flow of illegal guns to Jamaica and the rest of the region? And very quickly, it's still one. The Loss and Damage Fund was a part of COP27, but the details on the implementation are still outstanding. How will the fund work? Who will contribute to it? If you could give a little bit more details on that, please.
Well, in relation to the first question, all forms of traffic are interlinked, and they enhance each other. The traffic of drugs from south to north and the traffic of guns from the north to south are 2 faces of the same problem, and they need to be addressed simultaneously, and we will do everything possible to mobilize the countries themselves and the international community to fight it in an effective way. The loss and damage was a big victory of the Global South in the last COP, Conference of States Party. And we are working hard. The UNFCCC, that is the UN agency that supports the COP process, is working hard together with our climate team to create the conditions for the member states, because it's a group of member states that will be able to present a mechanism to put it in place. I strongly appeal to all those member states to come to an agreement to make sure that it becomes operational before the next COP. It would be absolutely unacceptable that something that took years and years and years and years to be achieved, the decision to have a loss and damage fund, would now be put into question by technicalities or by different power games or by whatever. My appeal is for all those that have a responsibility in making it happen to fully assume that responsibility. We cannot afford to go through the next COP without the loss and damage fund fully operational.
That was 1 in 2. So we have.
Secretary General, you have again reiterated your call for the international community to intervene in the crisis situation in Haiti. It appears as if your call, to some extent, has fallen on deaf ears. Countries like the United States, Canada, France, we have not seen any significant effort on their part to team up with, for example, their CARICOM friends. Our Prime Minister, he has done quite a bit in terms of even visiting the country. We have not heard much out of them in terms of international force to quell the violence. Could you first of all just tell us what are the other steps that you have in mind to address this crisis situation? And the second question has to do with the US $100 billion that was promised by the developed countries to small island developing states and developing countries in general. they have failed to meet that commitment to a large extent. What is being done to encourage or to prod them to actually get this done?
First, in relation to Haiti, there is indeed some reluctance from the countries that have a stronger capacity to be able to lead this kind of operation. I wouldn't call it an intervention, because I think it is more a police operation than anything else. Now, the only way, in my opinion, to overcome this reluctance, if I understand well the nature of the reluctance, is to put in place a political process that is credible. And that is why the Jamaican initiative is so important. I'm not saying that it will be automatic. What I'm saying is that we are in a kind of a stalemate now, and I hope that if we can make the political process move forward positively, we will be able to overcome the stalemate. But I strongly appeal to those countries that have the capacity to be ready to do so. Because, as I mentioned, Haiti is not only a problem for the Haitians, it's a problem for the region, and to a large extent is a problem to us all. Now, it is absolutely regrettable that the promises that were made in relation to the $100 billion per year since 2020 in support of developing countries have not been kept. And this is another injustice of our system. Not only the system is in itself unjust, but even the promises that are made within the system are not implemented. As it is not yet clear that the commitment that was made to double the finance for adaptation will be met. And this has been a huge cause of frustration in the developing world and a pretext for some emerging economies not to do what they also need to do in relation to the reduction of emissions. So my strong appeal to the international community, to the developed countries, is to make sure that we do not wait 1 minute more to make sure that these two promises are quickly implemented.
Thank you so much, Excellency. And as we close, just to wrap a few thoughts. In relation to Haiti, it is not that our pleas are falling on deaf ears. It is being heard and listened to. The question is the pace of action. As the Secretary General pointed out, countries who would want to support would also want to be assured that there is a political process in place that could yield an end result in a time frame that makes sense in terms of making a commitment. And so there is a step that has to be taken, which is building towards political consensus. And CARICOM and Jamaica is playing an active role in trying to get to that consensus point so that the end game of any form of support is clear. And I think we are making some progress in that regard, but clearly there still should be more effort, tangible effort, into what we're doing in terms of supporting Haiti. In terms of the $100 billion, as a country that did not contribute in any form to climate change, but a country that suffers from climate change, Excellency, Jamaica is going through a period of drought. In a month's time, we will be making announcements for our citizens to prepare for hurricane season. Jamaica is going through the driest 6-month period ever recorded in our recorded meteorological history. So we understand in real ways the impacts of climate change. What you have asked me to do, along with Prime Minister Trudeau, is to study, to examine and make recommendations, but more so to be global advocates for a fairer international financial system that considers not only market imperatives, but moral imperatives as well. And it is a moral imperative that more developed countries seek to ensure that countries like Jamaica, small island developing states who are vulnerable to climate impacts are put in a position where they can adapt to the changing climate, where there is some reparations for loss and damage, and that we benefit from technologies that could mitigate the impact. So we continue to work. We have been working, and we stand in solidarity with the UN system, and our voices will continue to work in practical ways within the UN system to achieve these reforms. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you, and again, I thank the Secretary General for visiting.
And ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our press conference for today. Thank you so much to Prime Minister the Most Honorable Andrew Holness and His Excellency Antonio Guterres. We invite those who are in the media room to recess, and we thank those joining online for joining us today. And we will see you again next time. Good afternoon.